In this lecture, we're going to discuss geocaching as a particular instance of community-maintained resources. So let's start by talking about community-maintained resources in general. In these websites, participants are responsible for generating content and for administering the site. They can be games, information resources, code repositories, sometimes even discussion boards. So some examples are geocaching, which we'll discuss today, and some of you may have heard of. Wikipedia is also another great example of a community-maintained resource. And so are things like open source code repositories, where a community will work on developing a piece of software, the code is submitted to a repository, and members of the community decide which pieces of code get included in the released version, and which pieces are logged in places that need more work. We're going to talk about geocaching as a particular case study. This is a GPS-oriented game and treasure hunt. You can learn more at geocaching.com. And the important thing about this is even though there's a company involved that writes the app that we'll use when we go do this activity and that maintains the website on the servers, users really control every aspect of the activity. They create the caches, they manage the site, they manage the caches, and there's actually an interesting cycle of how participation supports the community in maintaining the resource. So let's get into some details about what geocaching is. The gist of it is really captured in this quote from the paper I've assigned for you to read. I use multi-billion-dollar military satellites to find Tupperware hidden in the woods. So here are some details about how it works. Geocaching was launched when the military changed the accuracy of GPS satellites. When that technology originally became available to the general public, the military had an error built in, so you couldn't use it for other military operations. So you could be off by 100 yards sometimes in the measurement of where precisely you were according to the satellites. When they took that error out so you could get much more precise GPS readings, the founder of the activity went out, hid something in the woods, and posted the GPS coordinates of it and challenged people to go find it. And that's essentially what geocaching is today. You take a Tupperware container, an ammunition box, a pill bottle, you put some stuff in there that's interesting, you hide it, you post the GPS coordinates, and then people go to find it. The cache is the actual thing you hide, and it's a box of varying size. It usually contains a logbook, a pencil so people can write down that they visited it, and sometimes little trinkets to trade. The owner of a cache hides it, and so these are pictures from an actual cache that I went out and found as part of writing the book so I could have some photos. And you can actually see the cache in this picture, though it's pretty hard. If we zoom in a little bit, now you might be able to pick it out. We're looking at the base of this tree trunk. If you still can't see it, now you can see the outline of this ammunition box right here, hidden under this. If we take it out, this is the box. It has official geocache written on the outside. And if we open the box up, there's a Ziploc package with a pencil, a logbook, and some other stuff on the inside. That keeps it waterproof since it's hidden out in the woods. So after the owner hides the cache, they post the GPS coordinates on the geocaching website. There are community volunteers who approve caches according to a set of rules. That includes things like the caches can't be too close to railroad tracks, they can't be in places that would be considered terrorist targets, so people searching for them don't get harassed by the police. That includes things like airports or under bridges. And they can't be within closer than 0.1 miles of another cache, so that prevents a bunch of them from getting clustered in one place. Geocachers are people who participate in the activity. They go out and search for these caches, and when they find it, they sign the logbook, and they log their find, or if they didn't find it, they can log that on the geocaching website or through the geocaching app. And what we see in this picture is an example of a logbook where people have signed and put their names and the date that they found the cache. Caches can be big like this ammunition box or Tupperware containers, but there's all sorts of clever ones out there. These are a few pictures taken from the presentation that accompanies the paper I had you read. Some of the caches are super tiny, so this one here you can actually see is this thing. It's magnetic on the bottom, and the top screws off, and there's a spun up little spiral of paper that's stuck on the inside that serves as the log. If you're near campus and you do the activity for this week, you'll see that I've hidden one of these so-called micro caches on campus, and you have to find it, and it looks pretty similar to this. That's about as small as they get. They can also be hidden up in trees, so here you can see one hanging right there. But they can actually get much more clever or difficult than that. So here's an example of one where we've got a log here, and this part actually pulls off to reveal a hidden compartment that has a pill bottle that serves as the cache. This one is a fake bird's nest with a fake bird. You'd have to climb up in there and remove the bird to find the cache hidden on the inside. So that would be one where you have to climb a tree. This is the DC Beltway, so we're up here in College Park up in the corner. And you can see all these little dots are caches that are hidden in the area. You can click on one of those on the geocaching website, and you'll get information about the cache in a format that looks like this. So this is one of the caches that I hid originally for when I taught this class. The Professor's Cache 1 is hidden on campus. You have a difficulty rating, so this is quite easy since a lot of people in class have never done this before. And a terrain rating, that can be 1 star, which indicates it's handicapped accessible. You can get to it right off a sidewalk. It can get quite a bit difficult, so some caches require scuba gear or climbing equipment. These are all pretty easy on campus. You have to walk across some grass for the hardest ones. You get a description of the cache. Sometimes there's a hint that's sort of encrypted. That's so you don't actually spoil it for yourself, but you can click the decrypt button and see it. And you also get a map of the cache. So here's one where we're in Hornbake Plaza, and we're searching for the Professor's Cache 4. This is the 4th cache that I've hidden. The blue dot represents where I am, and this little star represents where the cache is hidden. So if you've been on campus, take a look at this, and you might be able to pick out what we're looking at and where the cache is hidden. It's outside this particular building, which a lot of you are probably familiar with. As you walk, if you're using the app, the blue dot will move where you move, and you can work your way closer towards the cache until you're right up on it. When you find a cache, one of the most important activities in geocaching is that you log it. So you can log that you didn't find it and leave a comment, that it needs maintenance. That could mean that the cache is gone. Sometimes it's wet. It rains and the cache gets wet. Sometimes the logbook is full, so users will post if that happens. Hopefully you'll be able to find the caches, and then you put found it. This is an example of a log where the cache was clearly okay, and then someone didn't find it. Another person said that it needs maintenance, it's no longer there. Another person didn't find it. So that would suggest to the cache owner that it's probably gone. There are over 2 million geocaches, including one on the International Space Station. You saw that map of the DC area. Here's a map of the world, and you can see that there are caches all over the place. So the question comes then, who maintains this? Who maintains the geocaching? The website's owned by a company called Groundspeak, and they maintain the servers and the software, but the caches are created and maintained by participants. And there's a lot of maintenance issues that can come up if you're working with something that's hidden out in the woods. The caches can get wet or damaged. Sometimes they just get taken away. I've had a number of caches that I've hidden get taken away by landscapers who come across them and just think they're trash. Muggles, which is a term that I actually learned came from Harry Potter when I was giving this lecture for the first time, since I never read those books, is a term that's been co-opted by geocaching to describe people who don't geocache. And they sometimes destroy them. They'll find them, and whether they know what it is or not, they'll throw it out, they'll spread all the contents all over the place. So a lot of things can happen. Administration is done by volunteers. People approve caches, and then they check that they follow those rules. And I gave you a list of the rules on an earlier slide. If enough people report a problem with a cache, the admin volunteers may remove it to allow new caches to be hidden. So hopefully the person who owns the cache will go out and fix it. Sometimes people who don't own it, who really want the cache to succeed, will also go out and fix it. But if a cache has just disappeared and no one hides it, no one repairs it, then the administrators who volunteer in the community can take it down, it gets marked as removed, and then someone else can hide a cache in that vicinity. But say you've placed caches. What do you do to maintain them? I've only placed probably 10, but some people have a dozen or even hundreds of caches. How do you go maintain those? It would be a lot of work if you had to go out every week and check on them, make sure they were there, make sure everything was okay. But it turns out that there's a nice cycle that follows with geocaching. We rely on the people who are caching and their log reports to tell us if the caches are okay or if they need maintenance. So if we think about some of the tasks, there's really two options for a cache owner. We can do nothing, or we can go maintain the cache. If a geocacher goes out and it marks that the cache was found, that tells us that it's still in place, that there's no problems, and basically we don't need to go do anything to maintain it. If someone has marked that they did not find the cache, that's what this DNF is, or if they report that the cache needs maintenance, then that tells us we need to go and maintain. So we really have a feedback cycle. Instead of having to go look at all of our caches and check to see if they need maintenance, we can just rely on the logs from people who have gone out searching for them, and that lets us know if everything's okay. This also is useful for other cachers. So, as I showed you in a previous shot, you can see a description, ratings, attributes, and a location of a cache. But you also get to see the logs of other people who have searched for it. So I can see if the last 10 people who have gone looking for the cache haven't been able to find it and they say it's not there, then that can help me understand whether or not it's worth looking for. And in that case, we'd probably say, no, it's not worth looking for. It's probably not there. But if the logs all say that it's been found and it was easy and everything's in good shape, then that's an extra endorsement for me to go out and find the cache myself. So there's a nice cycle that goes on here where people participating in the activity naturally provide information that's useful for both other members of the community who are searching and for the people who have created and need to maintain the caches. Let's look at some other community maintained resources just to get a broader sense of the topic. In general, in community maintained resources, the community controls both the content and the administration. So in geocaching, regular users can hide caches. They control the content, which includes the description, the GPS location, photos, and so on. And users also administer the site. So there are volunteers that allow caches to appear on the site, that can take them down if they're not maintained, and so on. But there are other places, as we mentioned before, that the community can participate. That includes things like wikis, forums, repositories. And there's a general rule that Jenny Priest came up with in her research in 2006. You probably recognize her name because she's now Dean of the iSchool. And that's the 99-1 rule. That says 90% of people are lurkers, or we could say passive participants. 9% are casual contributors, and 1% are heavy contributors. That works out in places like Wikipedia. So we have Wikipedia editors. I've edited things, and it generally is something like adding a comma or an apostrophe or changing a misspelling. I do really small edits on Wikipedia. And there's about 85,000 active contributors. Administrators on Wikipedia have about 1,500 people in their ranks, and bureaucrats, which are the really top, most heavily involved people, there's only about 34 of those. So that kind of illustrates how this 99-1 rule applies in a community-maintained resource like a wiki. Another really important issue that people talk about when they're looking at community-maintained resources is motivation. And there's a great model called the collective effort model that says people contribute if they believe their effort will lead to outcomes that they value. So something to consider for yourself is what are the kind of things that people value? And you can consider a specific website if that helps. So if we're talking about geocaching, I might contribute a cache if I believe that other people are going to find it and enjoy it and log it because I value people enjoying something that I've done. I like contributing if people get enjoyment out of that. So we obviously can't do an in-class discussion on this, but I'd like you to take a minute or two, maybe pause the lecture and think about some things that people value. Once you've done that, we'll go on to the next slide where we can talk about some specific motivations. People have asked this exact question with respect to Wikipedia, and here are, from a number of studies, common things that come out of that analysis. One of the things is values. People want to help others, and so they'll participate in Wikipedia because they like giving that help. There's social motivations, allowing people to engage with others and receive reputational credit for participating in a good activity. So if I participate in Wikipedia and edit pages, people may think I'm a good person or that I'm altruistic because I've given something, and that helps build my reputation and the way people think of me. Another motivation is understanding. I can help develop my own understanding of a topic by writing about it for Wikipedia. Career considerations are often cited as important. I can learn skills that may help me with finding, keeping, or advancing a job. A protective motivation talks about reducing guilt about one's privilege by sharing with others. So I may think I'm very lucky, I've had this great education, and I've been way more fortunate than everyone else. So to reduce my guilt about the luck that I've had in getting that, I'm going to reduce that by sharing with other people and actively contributing to the community. Enhancement means serving the community, and this is similar to the protective motivation, but it doesn't have the guilt component. So I may just think I've got a lot of interesting knowledge, other people might want to see that, and so I'm going to share with others so they can access it. Fun actually turns out to be really important. If the activity is enjoyable, people are often going to participate in it, and they don't need any motivation beyond that. And finally, ideology. Some people think that information should be freely available. Wikipedia is a site that makes it so, and so they're going to participate because ideologically they believe things like this should exist. And this is a cite to the study that pulled these particular things out, but as you'll see in the book, there's a number of studies on motivations for contributing to Wikipedia, and you can check all of those out. So this is a quick overview of community-maintained resources. The core ideas is that in these resources, participants are active at all levels from creation to maintenance and administration. People are motivated to participate for a variety of different resources, and effective community-maintained resources have cycles that make it easy for people to continue participating. And geocaching is a great example of that. Just by everyone naturally doing what they do as part of the activity, it provides information that allows the resource to stay updated, active, and reduces the effort on people who have contributed some of those resources. So a discussion that I'd like you to have on the discussion board, and that I'll start a thread for, is to talk about your participation in community-maintained resources. What was your motivation to participate? What was the resource you participated in? And how does your motivation match up with those listed on the previous slide about Wikipedia? So go ahead, post there, take a look at what your fellow classmates have said. And I hope this week you really enjoy the geocaching activity, which is your assignment, where you get to go out and actually participate in this.